Before you dismiss mystical experiences as imagination or wishful thinking, let me share what happened to Joel Goldsmith one quiet evening in 1928. This revelation would transform not only his life but thousands of others who discovered the profound truth he uncovered that night. That evening, alone in his room, Joel experienced something beyond ordinary consciousness. A presence filled his awareness, bringing with it an understanding that would challenge everything he believed about healing, God, and human limitation. This wasn't a dream or meditation vision. What he discovered in that moment became the foundation of a healing practice that defied medical explanation. People with terminal diagnoses found themselves completely restored. Business failures turned into unprecedented success through this mystical understanding. The presence whispered secrets that would revolutionize spiritual healing. Joel realized he had touched something that mystics throughout history had discovered but rarely shared openly. This experience would become his life's mission to teach others. The presence that visited Joel that evening whispered a truth so simple yet revolutionary that it would shake the foundations of traditional religious thinking. It revealed that God is not separate from us, waiting to be petitioned, but is the very essence of our being manifesting as individual consciousness. This wasn't mere philosophy or religious doctrine that Joel had studied in books. He felt this truth in every cell of his body. The separation between human and divine dissolved completely, revealing an intimate connection that had always existed but remained hidden from ordinary awareness. From that moment forward, Joel's life became a living demonstration of this mystical principle. Healing flowed through him not because he possessed special powers, but because he had awakened to the divine nature already present within every person who walked the earth. The transformation was immediate and permanent. Joel never again experienced himself as separate from divine consciousness. This mystical union became the source of healing power that would touch thousands of lives across the globe. Joel's mystical experience revealed what he called the infinite way, a path where healing happens not through human effort but through recognition of our divine nature. This wasn't about positive thinking or mental techniques, but about awakening to spiritual reality that exists beyond physical appearances. The presence showed him that every problem, every limitation, every disease exists only in the realm of human belief. When we touch the mystical dimension of consciousness, these appearances dissolve naturally because they have no foundation in spiritual truth or divine reality. This understanding challenged every conventional approach to healing that Joel had previously studied. He discovered that mystical consciousness doesn't fight problems or try to overcome them through willpower. It simply reveals their unreality in divine consciousness. The divine presence within us is already whole, already perfect, already free from every limitation that appears to human sense. Joel learned that healing means recognizing this perfection rather than trying to create it through human effort. What makes Joel's mystical revelation so powerful is its practical application in everyday life. This wasn't an otherworldly experience that left him floating in spiritual clouds, disconnected from human concerns. Instead, it gave him concrete tools for transformation that anyone could learn to use effectively. The mystical state Joel accessed became his normal consciousness through dedicated practice and surrender. He learned to enter this awareness at will, bringing divine perspective to every human challenge. This is the secret that transformed ordinary people into spiritual healers. You don't need special gifts or years of training to access this mystical dimension of consciousness. Joel's method reveals how to touch this healing consciousness right now, in this moment, regardless of your background, education, or current circumstances. The key is understanding that mystical consciousness is not something you achieve, but something you recognize. It's your true nature waiting to be acknowledged and allowed to express through your individual experience. Margaret Stevens had been told by 3 different doctors that her arthritis would confine her to a wheelchair within months. Traditional medicine offered only temporary relief through increasingly stronger medications with devastating side effects that were destroying her digestive system. When Margaret first heard about Joel's mystical approach to healing, she was deeply skeptical. How could spiritual consciousness possibly affect physical conditions that medical science couldn't cure? But desperation and the fear of permanent disability led her to attend one of Joel's healing sessions. During the session, Joel entered that mystical state he had discovered years earlier. Without touching Margaret or even speaking directly to her, he held her in divine consciousness, recognizing her spiritual perfection. Within minutes, the chronic pain that had tormented her for years simply vanished. 3 months later, Margaret was hiking in the mountains with her grandchildren, completely free from arthritis. Her transformation wasn't gradual improvement over time, but instant recognition of her spiritual perfection that dissolved the physical limitation entirely. Robert Chen faced bankruptcy after his construction business collapsed during the economic downturn. Creditors were demanding immediate payment, his family faced losing their home, and every conventional business strategy he had tried failed completely to turn the situation around. Robert discovered Joel's teachings about mystical consciousness affecting material circumstances. Initially, this seemed impossible. How could spiritual awareness influence bank accounts and business contracts? Yet desperation made him willing to try anything, even approaches that seemed impractical. Following Joel's method carefully, Robert learned to enter mystical consciousness before making business decisions. Instead of operating from fear and desperation, he accessed divine wisdom that revealed unexpected solutions and opportunities that his human thinking had completely overlooked. Within 6 months, Robert's business had not only recovered, but expanded beyond his original success. The mystical principle Joel taught him opened doors that human effort alone could never have accessed, creating abundance through divine guidance. Dr. Patricia Williams was a respected surgeon who prided herself on scientific thinking and evidence-based medicine. When patients began asking her about Joel's mystical healing approach, she dismissed it as dangerous superstition that could interfere with proper medical treatment. Her skepticism shattered when her own daughter developed a rare neurological condition that medical science couldn't cure. After exhausting every conventional treatment and consulting specialists worldwide, Patricia reluctantly attended one of Joel's teachings about mystical consciousness. What she witnessed there challenged everything she believed about healing and the nature of reality. Joel demonstrated that mystical awareness could produce tangible physical changes that defied medical explanation. Patricia realized she had been limiting herself to only one dimension of healing. Patricia began integrating Joel's mystical principles with her medical practice. Her patients experienced faster recovery times and more complete healings when she combined surgical skill with mystical consciousness, creating remarkable results. The transformations you've just heard aren't isolated incidents, but examples of thousands who discovered Joel's mystical approach to healing and manifestation. Each person started exactly where you are now, wondering if mystical experiences could really produce practical results in their lives. Joel's method works because it's based on spiritual law rather than human willpower or positive thinking. When you touch mystical consciousness, you're not trying to make something happen through mental effort. You're recognizing what is already true in divine reality. The mystical dimension Joel discovered is available to you right now, in this very moment. It doesn't require years of preparation or special circumstances. It only requires willingness to move beyond conventional thinking into the realm of spiritual reality. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond healing physical conditions, Joel's mystical experience revealed techniques for transforming every area of life. He discovered that the same consciousness that heals bodies also dissolves financial lack, broken relationships, and career limitations that seem impossible to overcome through human effort. The first complementary technique Joel taught is called recognition. This involves identifying yourself with infinite spirit rather than limited human personality. When you recognize your divine nature, external circumstances must align with this higher identity because spiritual law governs all manifestation. Practice recognition by beginning each day with this mystical awareness. I am not human seeking God, but divine consciousness expressing as human form. This shifts your entire experience from limitation to infinite possibility, opening pathways that were previously invisible. This technique alone has transformed thousands of lives when practiced consistently with understanding. Recognition doesn't require you to deny human experience, but to see it from the perspective of divine consciousness expressing through individual form. Joel's second technique addresses the persistent human tendency to judge by appearances and accept surface conditions as ultimate reality. He learned that mystical consciousness sees through what appears to physical senses to underlying spiritual reality that remains unchanged by external circumstances. This practice, called seeing rightly, involves looking beyond what your physical senses report to what divine consciousness reveals. Where you see problems, mystical awareness perceives opportunities for spiritual demonstration. Where others see limitation, you recognize infinite possibility. When facing challenges, pause and ask divine consciousness to reveal the spiritual reality behind appearances. Joel discovered that this mystical perspective dissolves problems at their root, rather than merely managing symptoms or providing temporary relief from difficulties. Seeing rightly transforms your entire relationship with circumstances. Instead of being victim to conditions, you become witness to divine consciousness expressing perfect harmony through apparent discord and limitation. The third technique Joel developed focuses on what he called impersonal love. This isn't emotional affection or human sentiment, but mystical consciousness recognizing divine perfection in everyone and everything, regardless of their behavior or appearance to human sense. Impersonal love sees beyond human personality to the Christ nature present in all beings. This mystical vision dissolves conflicts, heals relationships, and reveals harmony where discord seemed to exist. It's the most powerful relationship transformer Joel ever discovered. Practice impersonal love by silently blessing difficult people with recognition of their divine nature. Joel discovered that this mystical approach transforms relationships more effectively than any human psychology or communication technique because it works at the level of consciousness. When you consistently practice impersonal love, you'll notice that people respond to you differently because you're seeing their spiritual identity rather than their human personality. This creates space for their higher nature to emerge. Joel's fourth technique involves understanding the mystical principle of non-reaction. Instead of being pulled into drama and conflict, mystical consciousness remains anchored in spiritual truth, regardless of outer circumstances or other people's behavior and emotional states. Non-reaction doesn't mean being passive or uncaring about life around you. Rather, it means responding from divine wisdom instead of human emotion. This mystical centeredness allows appropriate action without being controlled by external pressures or other people's energy. When chaos surrounds you, return to mystical awareness of your divine nature. Joel taught that this inner stillness becomes a sanctuary that nothing external can disturb, providing guidance and peace in any situation you might encounter. Non-reaction creates space between you and circumstances, allowing divine consciousness to respond through you rather than reactive human personality. This transforms you from victim to spiritual presence in every situation. Even with these powerful techniques, you may encounter challenges in developing mystical consciousness. Joel himself faced periods when the divine presence seemed distant and healing power appeared to diminish. These experiences are normal parts of spiritual development, not failures. The most common obstacle is trying to use mystical principles as techniques to get something, rather than recognizing what already is. Joel learned that divine consciousness cannot be manipulated, but only surrendered to and recognized as your true nature. When mystical experiences don't come easily, Joel recommended returning to the fundamental recognition of your divine nature. Don't try to make something happen through spiritual effort. Simply acknowledge what is eternally true about your spiritual identity. Remember that mystical consciousness is not an achievement but a recognition. You're not trying to become something you're not, but awakening to what you have always been beneath the surface of human personality and conditioning. Another challenge involves maintaining mystical consciousness in daily activities. It's easier to touch divine awareness in meditation than while dealing with traffic, demanding bosses, or crying children. Yet Joel discovered this integration is where real transformation occurs. Joel learned that mystical consciousness isn't an escape from human experience, but a way of transforming it from within. Divine awareness doesn't require perfect external conditions, but brings perfection to whatever conditions exist in your immediate experience. Practice carrying mystical consciousness into ordinary activities by frequently remembering your divine nature throughout the day. Joel taught that brief moments of recognition are more effective than lengthy meditations followed by unconscious living. The goal isn't to live in a monastery, but to transform everyday life into spiritual practice. Every interaction becomes opportunity to express divine consciousness. Every challenge becomes invitation to demonstrate spiritual truth. Many people struggle with doubt about their mystical experiences. When divine consciousness produces healing or unexpected solutions, the human mind questions whether it was coincidence or imagination. This doubt can block further spiritual development if not addressed properly. Joel learned to trust mystical experiences even when they couldn't be explained rationally. Divine consciousness operates beyond human logic and doesn't require intellectual understanding to be effective. Faith in spiritual reality deepens through experience, not explanation. Document your experiences with mystical consciousness, noting both dramatic and subtle changes in your life circumstances. Joel found that keeping records helps overcome doubt and builds confidence in divine guidance and healing power working through you. Don't expect others to understand or validate your mystical experiences. Joel discovered that spiritual awakening often creates temporary separation from those who haven't had similar experiences, but this resolves as love and understanding replace judgment. The greatest challenge in mystical development is consistency. Joel observed that people often experience profound divine consciousness initially, then struggle to maintain this awareness over time as old patterns of thinking and reacting reassert themselves.
He discovered that mystical consciousness isn't achieved once and kept forever like a college degree. It must be cultivated daily through recognition, practice, and surrender to divine guidance. Like physical fitness, spiritual awareness requires ongoing attention and commitment.
Create daily practices that reconnect you with mystical consciousness. Joel recommended starting each morning with recognition of your divine nature and ending each evening with gratitude for divine guidance throughout the day, regardless of how successful you felt. Consistency in small practices creates foundation for major spiritual breakthroughs. Joel found that students who maintained simple daily recognition often experienced more profound transformation than those who sought dramatic mystical experiences. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? After years of developing mystical consciousness, Joel began applying these principles to increasingly complex situations. He discovered that divine awareness could transform not just individual problems, but entire communities and organizations when properly understood and applied. One advanced application involves bringing mystical consciousness to social and environmental challenges. Joel learned that when groups of people unite in divine awareness, they can influence collective consciousness and create positive change on scales far beyond individual transformation. This doesn't mean trying to force outcomes through spiritual manipulation or imposing your will on others. Instead, it involves holding collective situations in divine consciousness, allowing spiritual truth to transform circumstances through natural unfoldment of divine order. Joel witnessed remarkable transformations in communities where groups practiced mystical consciousness together. Crime rates decreased, economic conditions improved, and social harmony increased as divine consciousness penetrated collective human consciousness. Joel's mature mystical practice extended to what he called global healing work. He discovered that divine consciousness knows no geographical boundaries and can bring healing influence to people and situations anywhere in the world through transcendence of space and time. This advanced practice involves entering mystical consciousness and holding specific people, communities, or situations in divine awareness without trying to determine outcomes. The healing power of mystical consciousness flows where it's needed most, guided by divine wisdom. Many students reported remarkable synchronicities when practicing global healing work. They received unexpected help during Joel's mystical sessions, or found solutions to problems, while Joel held them in divine consciousness from thousands of miles away, demonstrating spiritual interconnectedness. Global healing work reveals that mystical consciousness operates beyond physical laws. Distance, Time and material conditions cannot limit the expression of divine love and healing power when channeled through awakened consciousness. Perhaps Joel's most advanced mystical application involved what he called resurrection work, bringing divine consciousness to situations that appeared hopeless or beyond human help. This practice requires complete surrender of human judgment about what's possible. Joel learned to approach apparently desperate circumstances with mystical consciousness that recognizes only divine perfection and infinite possibility. He refused to accept human limitations as final or to be impressed by negative medical, financial, or relationship diagnoses. Resurrection work produced some of Joel's most dramatic healings, restoring relationships that had ended bitterly, reviving businesses that had completely failed, and bringing healing to conditions medical science considered terminal and beyond hope. This advanced practice isn't about denial of problems, but recognition that divine consciousness is more powerful than any human condition. Joel demonstrated that there are no hopeless situations, only limited perspectives that mystical awareness can transform. In his later years, Joel developed mystical consciousness to the point where divine awareness became his normal state, rather than something he accessed occasionally during meditation or healing sessions. This constant mystical consciousness transformed everything he touched. People reported feeling healing energy simply by being in Joel's presence, even when he wasn't consciously trying to heal anyone. His mystical consciousness created an atmosphere where problems resolved naturally and divine guidance flowed freely to everyone around him. This advanced state isn't reserved for special individuals or spiritual masters. Joel insisted that every person has the capacity to develop mystical consciousness to this degree through consistent practice and surrender to divine guidance over time. The key is understanding that mystical consciousness isn't the achievement to attain, but your natural state to uncover. Beneath layers of human conditioning and social programming lies your divine nature, waiting to be recognized and expressed. The ultimate goal of Joel's mystical path isn't to gain special powers or achieve personal advantages over others. It's to become a transparent channel for divine consciousness, to bless the world through your unique expression and individual gifts. This complete transformation happens gradually as you consistently choose mystical awareness over human reaction in daily situations. Joel taught that spiritual maturity means being more concerned with giving divine love than receiving human approval or recognition. When mystical consciousness becomes your primary identity, you discover that your deepest fulfillment comes from serving as an instrument of divine healing and guidance for others who are ready to awaken to their own spiritual nature. Personal desires don't disappear but are transformed. Instead of seeking to get something from life, you become focused on what divine consciousness wants to give through you. This shift creates profound satisfaction and purpose. Joel's mystical vision ultimately revealed that there is no separation between individual consciousness and universal divine consciousness. What appears as personal awakening is actually recognition of the one infinite spirit expressing as all beings and all creation. This understanding dissolves the final illusion of separate selfhood that keeps humans feeling isolated and limited. You realize that your mystical experiences aren't personal achievements, but glimpses of the divine nature that is equally present in everyone and everything. From this mystical perspective, healing others and healing yourself are the same activity. Blessing others and being blessed are one movement of divine consciousness, recognizing its own infinite nature, expressing through apparent multiplicity. This recognition eliminates spiritual pride and competition. You can't be superior to others because you recognize that the same divine consciousness expressing through you is expressing through them, waiting to be acknowledged and allowed. As Joel's mystical consciousness matured, he discovered that the divine presence he had first encountered in 1928 was actually his own deepest nature finally recognizing itself. The separation between human Joel and divine presence was revealed as illusion, created by identification with personality. This recognition transforms your entire approach to spiritual practice. Instead of seeking connection with God somewhere outside yourself, you realize you are the expression of divine consciousness seeking to recognize itself more completely through human experience. Every moment becomes an opportunity for deeper mystical awareness. Whether dealing with mundane tasks or profound challenges, you can always return to recognition of your divine nature and allow this consciousness to guide your responses. The search for God ends when you realize God is what you are. The mystical journey becomes not about reaching some distant goal, but about expressing divine consciousness more fully in present circumstances. The mystical experience that transformed Joel's life is available to you right now in this very moment. It doesn't require special circumstances, years of preparation, or exceptional spiritual gifts. It only requires willingness to recognize your divine nature as present reality. Begin this moment by acknowledging that infinite spirit is your true identity, not your human personality or life circumstances. Feel this mystical consciousness flowing through your awareness, bringing with it the healing power that dissolved Joel's limitations and can dissolve yours. You are not separate from the divine presence that visited Joel that evening in 1928. You are that presence, awakening to its own infinite nature and unlimited power to heal, bless, and transform everything it touches through your individual expression. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.
Have you ever felt that something fundamental was missing in your spiritual life? That despite all your prayers, worship, and devotion, God somehow remained distant, unreachable? A divine power separate from you, listening from afar, but never truly present. What if everything you've been taught about God, prayer, and your relationship with the divine has been fundamentally backward? What if the greatest spiritual minds throughout history have been approaching the entire concept from the wrong direction? This is exactly what spiritual teacher Joel Goldsmith discovered after 30 years of searching through every religion, philosophy, and healing method known to humanity. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? You've prayed fervently for healing, abundance, or guidance, only to feel as though your words were echoing in an empty room? You're not alone. For centuries, humanity has been conditioned to approach spirituality from a place of lack, as separate beings desperately trying to get God's attention, to become worthy of divine love and intervention. In 1946, during what he described as his deepest spiritual crisis, Joel Goldsmith experienced a revelation that shattered everything he thought he knew about God and spirituality. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely transform how you understand your relationship with the divine and the very nature of reality itself. Joel realized that God isn't some external power waiting in heaven to be contacted through prayer or worship. The divine isn't separate from you at all. The revolutionary truth he uncovered is that God is your very consciousness when it's free from the illusion of separation. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's the practical foundation for what we perceive as miracles in our lives. Think about those moments of profound peace you've experienced, those flashes of love or sudden knowing that transcended your circumstances. What if those weren't brief connections to something outside yourself, but glimpses of your true nature shining through without the interference of fear-based thinking? What if the Christ, Buddha nature, or divine presence that spiritual traditions have pointed to for millennia is actually your own consciousness in its pure form? This recognition changes everything about how we approach challenges, relationships, health, and abundance. Imagine no longer being a limited human being seeking help from God, but divine consciousness itself, expressing as your individual human experience. The implications of this shift in perspective are profound and far-reaching, affecting every aspect of how we live, heal, and relate to ourselves and others. But how do we make this transition from intellectual understanding to lived experience? What does it mean to practice the presence of God when God isn't somewhere else, but is your very consciousness. And how did Joel Goldsmith apply this revolutionary understanding to create what many have described as miraculous healings and transformations in people's lives? If you're resonating with Joel Goldsmith's transformative teachings, hit subscribe to join our community of spiritual explorers discovering the infinite way together. Joel called this inner divine presence the Christ within, not as a religious concept limited to Christianity, but as a universal principle describing our true spiritual identity. This revelation transcends all religious boundaries and speaks to a hidden truth about our fundamental nature that mystics across traditions have glimpsed throughout history. Think about those moments when inspiration strikes from nowhere, when you feel inexplicable peace amid chaos, or when love flows through you without effort. These aren't random spiritual experiences or lucky encounters with divinity. They're glimpses of your authentic self shining through the clouds of conditioned thinking. Every time you felt connected to something greater, you weren't reaching outward, but simply experiencing your own consciousness without interference. Now, I want to go even deeper into this transformative mindset shift. Joel developed what he called practicing the presence, but this isn't what most people understand as meditation or prayer. Traditional spiritual practices often reinforce the very separation they aim to overcome. You sit down for 20 minutes, reach out to God, and then return to normal life. The revolutionary approach Joel discovered completely reimagines this journey. Rather than seeing yourself as a human being who occasionally has spiritual moments during designated practice times, you begin recognizing yourself as spiritual consciousness, having a temporary human experience in every moment of every day. This fundamental reversal creates a profound impact on how you navigate challenges, relationships, and even mundane activities. Imagine walking through your day, not as someone seeking connection with the divine, but as divine consciousness itself, expressing through your unique human form. The implications of this perspective shift ripple through every aspect of your life experience. The beauty of this revelation is that it's not about adding something new to your life or struggling to achieve some elevated spiritual state. It's about recognizing what's already true beneath the surface appearance of separation. This recognition doesn't happen through effort or spiritual techniques, but through allowing the natural state of your being to reveal itself when the mind stops its constant interference. The practicing isn't something you schedule for morning and evening. It becomes the foundation from which you live every moment. You begin seeing through what Joel called appearances to the underlying harmony that's always been present. Every challenge becomes an invitation to go deeper into truth, to practice seeing beyond the material world to spiritual reality. What makes this approach so different from traditional spiritual paths is that it doesn't require you to reject your humanity or transcend ordinary life. Instead, it transforms ordinary life from within by changing the consciousness from which you experience everything. Your relationships, work, and daily activities become expressions of the divine rather than distractions from it. Write in the comments, "I recognize the presence within," if this perspective shift resonates with your own spiritual journey. This understanding takes us to what Joel described as the most revolutionary aspect of his teaching, the revelation of oneness. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't making a special claim, unique to himself, but revealing a universal truth about every human being's relationship with the divine. Joel taught that the moment we truly realize this oneness, a profound shift occurs. We stop being a person who needs healing and become the very presence that does the healing. Think about the radical implications of this mindset transformation. You're no longer trying to get something from God, whether that's healing, abundance, peace, or guidance. You are the God presence expressing itself as your individual consciousness. This isn't spiritual theory or abstract philosophy. It's the practical foundation for what we perceive as miracles in everyday life. When you approach challenges from this perspective of oneness, you're not trying to solve problems through spiritual effort or technique. You're recognizing that in ultimate reality, the problem doesn't exist because there is no separation from your good. This recognition doesn't deny human experiences or challenges. It simply places them in their proper context within the bigger picture of your spiritual identity. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this profound revelation actually occurs within consciousness. The fascinating discovery Joel made is that this realization doesn't happen through effort, technique, or years of spiritual practice. It happens through what he called resting in the silence of being, a state where thoughts stop trying to fix, change, or improve anything, and the mind releases its grip on outcomes and solutions. This journey into silence reveals one of the hidden truths behind all genuine spiritual transformation. The more we try to achieve spiritual understanding through mental effort, the more we reinforce the very separation we're trying to overcome. The mind that's seeking God is the very obstacle to the realization that there is no separation from God. In those moments when thinking subsides, not through force, but through gentle surrender, truth reveals itself naturally. This isn't about emptying your mind through discipline or technique. It's about allowing the natural silence that exists beneath the constant chatter of thoughts to emerge on its own. In that silence, the illusion of separation dissolves, and your true nature as divine consciousness becomes self-evident. Joel discovered that this silence is not something you create. It's something you allow. It's already there beneath the noise of habitual thinking. When you stop trying to make spiritual progress and simply rest in the awareness that's already present, a space opens where revelation can occur. This is why authentic spiritual realization often happens in moments of surrender rather than in moments of greatest effort. If you've ever experienced a moment where everything suddenly made sense, where clarity emerged not from figuring something out, but from letting go of trying to figure it out, write in the comments, "The silence speaks to me." What makes Joel's approach so revolutionary is how this understanding manifested as what many would call miraculous healing. His method wasn't about sending energy, using affirmations, or treating conditions with spiritual techniques. It was about sitting in the silence of being with those who came to him for help. In this silence, he simply recognized their true spiritual identity beneath the appearance of disease or disorder. Ready to continue this spiritual journey? Subscribe now to access more profound insights that can transform your understanding of consciousness and spiritual reality. One remarkable case Joel documented involved a woman diagnosed with terminal cancer. Doctors had given her no hope for recovery. Instead of trying to treat her condition with conventional or even alternative healing methods, Joel sat with her in this profound silence of being. He didn't see her as a sick person needing healing, but recognized her as spiritual perfection, temporarily obscured by false belief. Within weeks, every trace of cancer disappeared from her body. Medical professionals called it impossible, but Joel understood it as the inevitable result of recognizing truth. The power of this revelation becomes even clearer through the journey of people whose lives were transformed through this understanding. Consider Margaret's story. After 15 years of debilitating chronic pain that dominated every aspect of her life, she had tried everything from conventional medicine to every alternative therapy available. The breakthrough came not during formal meditation, but while washing dishes one ordinary morning. In that mundane moment, something extraordinary happened. Margaret suddenly realized she'd been seeking healing as Margaret, the suffering person. In that instant of clarity, the identity that had been suffering for 15 years simply disappeared from her awareness, and only pure consciousness remained. Within 3 months, the chronic pain that had defined her existence was completely gone. But even more significant was that Margaret discovered she was living from an entirely different foundation. Fear-based thinking had lost its grip on her consciousness. Then there's Robert's behind-the-scenes transformation from financial devastation to unexpected abundance. Facing complete ruin after 20 years of building his business, bankruptcy papers were being prepared, and his marriage was crumbling under financial pressure. Traditional manifestation techniques had only intensified his frustration and hopelessness. Joel taught him something fundamentally different from conventional prosperity teachings. Instead of trying to attract abundance from outside himself, Robert learned to recognize the abundance that was already present in his consciousness as his spiritual birthright. The mindset shift was profound. He stopped seeing himself as lacking and needing to attract prosperity from some external source. As Robert began living from this recognition of inherent wholeness, rather than acquired prosperity, opportunities appeared naturally without struggle. These revelations weren't limited to physical healing and financial recovery. Sarah's journey through severe depression illustrates how this understanding addresses our deepest emotional challenges. After years of therapy and medication providing only temporary relief, Sarah discovered through Joel's teaching that depression wasn't something wrong with her that needed fixing. It was the natural result of consciousness believing it was separate from its source. If you've experienced a healing or transformation in your own life that seemed to come not from technique, but from a shift in perception, type, "I've witnessed this shift" in the comments. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the practical methodology Joel developed through his decades of spiritual work. Beyond the foundational understanding of oneness, Joel created what he called spiritual treatment. Though this term can be misleading if we view it through conventional healing paradigms. This approach isn't about sending thoughts, energy, or prayers to fix problems. It isn't about visualizing positive outcomes or manipulating energy fields. The revolutionary insight behind spiritual treatment is recognizing the spiritual truth that dissolves the very illusion creating the appearance of problems in the first place. When someone calls a practitioner trained in Joel's approach asking for help with a health challenge, financial crisis, or relationship conflict, the practitioner doesn't try to heal the condition or solve the problem. Instead, they rest in the recognition that in spiritual truth, there is no person with a condition. There is only perfect spiritual being expressing itself. This recognition in consciousness has immediate and tangible effects in what we call the physical world. The practitioner undergoes a complete identity shift from being a helper trying to assist another person to becoming a transparency for truth. This transparency allows divine consciousness to flow without the interference of personal thinking, conditioning, or the belief in separation. In this state of transparent consciousness, healing happens not because something is sent to fix a problem, but because the truth of being dissolves the illusion that created the appearance of discord. This mindset transformation leads to what Joel called spiritual discernment, the developed ability to see beyond appearances to spiritual reality in every situation you encounter. Consider how you perceive a magnificent sunset. You're not simply seeing colored light hitting particles in the atmosphere. You're witnessing infinite beauty expressing itself in form. This same discernment applies to everything in your experience throughout each day. When you look at what appears as lack, discord, disease, or limitation, spiritual discernment reveals these as merely appearances that have no spiritual reality. Behind every appearance of discord lies perfect harmony waiting to be recognized. Behind every appearance of lack lies infinite abundance already present. Behind every appearance of disease lies perfect wholeness that has never been compromised. The hidden truth that Joel discovered is that this discernment isn't about denying what appears to be happening or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing what's really happening behind the appearances, divine consciousness expressing itself perfectly even when that perfection is temporarily obscured by limited perception. This recognition naturally transforms your experience without effort or struggle. You don't change the appearances through force of will or spiritual technique. You see through them to reality, and the appearances naturally align with the truth you're recognizing rather than the illusion you were believing. If you've ever experienced a moment where you suddenly saw through a problem to its solution without figuring it out, share "I've glimpsed behind the curtain" in the comments. One of Joel's most profound and transformative concepts was what he called the art of dying daily. This phrase can be jarring at first. It sounds almost morbid, but it has nothing to do with physical death. Instead, it points to a spiritual practice of allowing the personal sense of self to die moment by moment throughout your day. Think about it. How much of your suffering, anxiety, and limitation comes from identifying with a personal self that feels separate from everyone and everything? This personal sense believes it lacks what it needs, fears what might happen, and constantly struggles to protect and enhance itself. Joel discovered that every time you catch yourself thinking as this separate self, you can consciously let that perception die in that very moment. This isn't about self-denial or asceticism. It's about recognizing when you're operating from the limited perspective of personal identity and choosing to shift to your broader spiritual awareness instead. With each small death of the personal sense, you experience a corresponding rebirth into your true identity as divine consciousness. What's remarkable is that with consistent practice, this dying and rebirthing process becomes increasingly natural and automatic. You don't have to constantly remember to do it. It begins happening spontaneously as your consciousness shifts its foundation from personal identity to spiritual reality. This creates a momentum of transformation that eventually becomes self-sustaining, like a flywheel that continues spinning with minimal effort. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what Joel called the middle path, perhaps his most practical and revolutionary discovery about living spiritually in today's world. Unlike many spiritual traditions that suggest withdrawing from worldly life to achieve enlightenment, Joel found that authentic transformation happens while fully engaged with human experience. The middle path means living fully human while simultaneously knowing yourself as divine consciousness. You don't transcend the human experience or escape into some ethereal spiritual realm. You live ordinary human life from your true spiritual foundation. This means you still pay your bills, maintain relationships, care for your body, and fulfill responsibilities. But you do all of this from the recognition of your true nature, rather than from fear, lack, or separation. This approach dissolves the false dichotomy between being spiritual and being practical. Many seekers struggle with this perceived conflict, feeling they must choose between spiritual ideals and worldly effectiveness. Joel discovered that authentic spirituality makes you supremely practical because you're operating from truth rather than illusion, from abundance rather than limitation, from love rather than fear. From this perspective, work becomes worship, relationships become holy encounters, and even the most mundane activities transform into opportunities for divine expression. The ordinary becomes sacred not because you're adding spiritual meaning to it, but because you recognize the spiritual reality that was always present within it. If you've experienced moments where the ordinary suddenly revealed itself as sacred, share "I've touched the infinite in the ordinary" in the comments. While Joel's teachings offer profound liberation, He was always honest about the challenges we face on this spiritual journey. One of the most common experiences he described is what mystics have called spiritual dryness, or the dark night of the soul. These are periods when, despite your deepest understanding and practice, old thought patterns seem to return with surprising intensity. You might find yourself doubting everything you've learned, feeling like you're back where you started, or wondering if any of this spiritual understanding is real or just wishful thinking. What's remarkable about Joel's insight is that he recognized these difficult periods not as failures or regressions, but as evidence of genuine progress. These challenges often arise precisely when consciousness is undergoing its deepest transformations. They represent the final attempts of conditioned thinking to maintain its grip on your awareness before a significant breakthrough. The key revelation here is not to fight against these experiences or judge yourself for having them, but to continue resting in truth even when you don't feel it. Your spiritual understanding doesn't depend on feeling good or having positive experiences. It remains true regardless of temporary emotional states. These darker passages become opportunities to prove to yourself that your foundation isn't built on shifting sands of feeling, but on the bedrock of spiritual reality. Another shadow that appears on the path is what Joel identified as spiritual pride, the subtle tendency to believe you're more evolved, more enlightened, or spiritually superior to others who haven't discovered these truths. This form of separation can actually block your continued unfoldment, creating a new identity of spiritual me that's just as limiting as any other form of personal identity. The antidote Joel prescribed for spiritual pride is genuine humility, recognizing that spiritual understanding is a gift of grace, not a personal achievement or accomplishment. This awareness isn't something you earned or deserved any more than you earned the ability to breathe. When spiritual pride arises, and it will arise even in the most sincere seekers, return immediately to gratitude for the truth revealing itself through your consciousness. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by examining perhaps the most challenging aspect of Joel's teaching: learning to live without the mental habit of trying to use spiritual truth to get something. The conditioned mind constantly wants to turn these principles into techniques for manifesting desires, solving problems, or achieving better life circumstances. But the moment you try to use truth to get something, you've stepped back into the consciousness of separation. You've become a person who lacks something trying to use spirituality to acquire it. The decision to recognize that you already are everything you could ever need fundamentally changes your relationship with desire itself. Desires don't disappear in this recognition. They transform. They arise from fullness rather than emptiness. They become natural expressions of your spiritual nature, rather than attempts to fill perceived gaps in your experience. If you've noticed your desires shifting from "I need this to be complete" to "I'd enjoy experiencing this as an expression of my completeness," share "My desires are transforming" in the comments. Joel's spiritual journey ultimately led him to what he called the final sacrifice. Perhaps the most counterintuitive yet liberating aspect of this entire path. After years of spiritual seeking, practice, and even profound experiences, he discovered that the ultimate freedom comes when we give up even the desire for spiritual experiences, spiritual progress, or advanced spiritual understanding. This revelation strikes at the very heart of the spiritual search itself. As long as you're seeking something spiritual, enlightenment, awakening, deeper understanding, mystical experiences, you're maintaining the fundamental illusion of separation from what you seek. The very act of seeking reinforces the belief that what you're looking for is something other than what you already are. The final sacrifice isn't something you can accomplish through effort or discipline. It comes through what Joel called grace, those spontaneous moments when seeking naturally stops, not because you found what you were looking for, but because you suddenly realize the seeker and the sought are one and have always been one. The search ends not through achievement but through recognition. These moments of grace can't be produced through effort or spiritual techniques, but they can be welcomed. When you stop trying to become spiritual and simply rest in what you are right now, without judgment, without trying to improve or change anything, the spiritual nature of your being reveals itself naturally. This is the true end of the spiritual path, because you realize there was never anywhere to go or anything to attain. The revelation that accompanies this final sacrifice is profound freedom, living without spiritual seeking while being constantly aware of your spiritual nature. You become ordinary in the most extraordinary way, completely human while completely divine. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring the ultimate fruit of Joel's teaching, what he called the mystical life. This isn't some exotic state reserved for monks, nuns, or spiritual adepts who've withdrawn from ordinary existence. It's available to everyone because everyone is spiritual consciousness expressing as individual human experience. The mystical life is living in constant conscious communion with the divine presence that you are. Prayer transforms from periodic asking for help, guidance, or intervention into an ongoing recognition of truth. Every moment becomes an opportunity to witness infinite love, expressing itself as your experience and the experience of everyone around you. In this state of consciousness, work naturally becomes worship. Relationships naturally become holy encounters. The most ordinary activities naturally become expressions of divine creativity. You realize that the mystical life isn't separate from ordinary human life. It's ordinary human life lived from your true spiritual identity. What's remarkable about Joel's discovery is that nothing in your external circumstances needs to change for you to live the mystical life. Only the foundation from which you perceive and respond to everything shifts. This shift in consciousness transforms your entire experience of life from within, without requiring any change in external conditions. If you've experienced moments where the boundary between the spiritual and ordinary dissolved, revealing that they were never truly separate, share "I've tasted the mystical life" in the comments. As we've explored Joel Goldsmith's revolutionary spiritual discoveries, I hope you've caught glimpses of what he called the infinite way, this profound path of recognizing your true identity beyond all appearances. What makes Joel's teaching so powerful is that it's not about adding more spiritual practices to your life or becoming a different person. It's about recognizing what's already true about who you really are. This recognition isn't something you achieve through years of spiritual effort. It's available in this very moment whenever consciousness rests in its own nature. The journey isn't about becoming spiritual, but recognizing the spirituality that has always been your true identity. If something in this message resonated deeply with you, as if you were remembering something you've always known rather than learning something new, I'd love for you to leave a comment saying, "This truth was already within me." Your perspective adds valuable dimensions to this conversation that others can benefit from. I create these videos to build a community of spiritual explorers who are interested in going beyond traditional approaches to discover what's really true. If you found value in today's exploration, consider subscribing so we can continue this journey together. Each like also helps share these transformative ideas with others who might be searching for exactly this understanding. The mystical life that Joel discovered isn't reserved for special people or dedicated seekers. It's the birthright of every human being because it's what we already are beneath the appearances. I've prepared another video that explores how to apply these principles to heal specific challenges in relationships. Click right here and let's continue exploring this infinite way together.
For centuries, this biblical phrase has been misunderstood, creating separation and spiritual elitism. Joel Goldsmith revealed something revolutionary. Being chosen is not about divine favoritism. It's about your willingness to awaken to a truth that's already present within you. The calling comes to everyone, but few choose to answer it with their whole being. The shocking truth is this: you are not waiting to be chosen by God. God is waiting for you to choose the path of spiritual consciousness. This isn't about worthiness or special selection. It's about your decision to move beyond the world of effects and enter the realm of cause. Every person receives the same divine invitation, but most remain distracted by external seeking. What makes someone chosen is their commitment to inner work, to silence, to practicing the presence of God moment by moment. Joel taught that this selection happens through your own spiritual dedication. When you turn within consistently, you discover you were never separate from the divine. The choice has always been yours to make, and today you can make it. Most people pray for God to change their circumstances, to fix their problems, to deliver miracles from outside themselves. This is why they remain among the many called, but never experience true transformation. Joel discovered that authentic spiritual power flows differently. It comes through realization, not through begging or pleading with an external deity to intervene. The chosen ones understand a mystical secret. God is not a person who decides your fate. God is the consciousness you embody when you awaken to your true spiritual nature. This means your healing, your abundance, your peace are not coming from somewhere else. They emerge from within as you align with infinite consciousness. This shift changes everything about how you approach life. When you stop seeking God's favor and start realizing God's presence as your own consciousness, you become one of the few who are chosen, not by divine whim, but by spiritual maturity, not by luck, but by understanding. Joel spent decades proving this truth through countless healings that occurred when people shifted from petition to realization. Here's what Joel taught that transforms everything. The kingdom of God is within you right now. Not tomorrow, not after you become more worthy, not when you pray harder. This present moment contains the fullness of divine presence. The chosen ones are simply those who stop postponing their spiritual inheritance and claim it through conscious awareness today. This requires a complete reversal of how you've been taught to approach spirituality. Instead of asking God for things, you rest in the awareness that God is already being itself as your very existence. Instead of trying to get somewhere spiritually, you recognize you are already there. The journey is not toward God, but as God expressing through your unique consciousness. Joel called this the practice of the presence. It means living each moment aware that divine consciousness is the only power, the only presence, the only reality. When this becomes your consistent state, not just an idea but your lived experience, you discover you are among the chosen. You chose yourself by choosing truth over illusion, presence over seeking. The technique Joel gave us is simple, but requires dedication. Several times each day, pause whatever you're doing. Close your eyes for just 60 seconds. Silently acknowledge, God is the only presence here, the only power operating. Don't ask for anything. Don't try to fix anything. Simply rest in this awareness. Let it saturate your consciousness like light filling a room. This is not meditation, not visualization, not affirmation. It's recognition of what is already true. In those 60 seconds, you're not becoming chosen, you're realizing you already are. The divine consciousness that created galaxies is the same consciousness reading these words through your eyes right now. There's no separation to overcome, only illusion to dissolve through consistent awareness. Practice this recognition throughout your day, before meetings, in traffic, while cooking, upon waking. Each time you do, you're strengthening your realization that you are not separate from the source. Within weeks, you'll notice circumstances shifting, not because God finally heard you, but because your consciousness changed. You became one of the few who chose to live from spiritual truth rather than material appearance. Let me share what happened to a woman named Margaret, who studied with Joel in the early 1950s. She had suffered from chronic pain for 7 years. Doctors found nothing wrong, yet the pain persisted daily. She prayed constantly, begged God for healing, attended every healing service available. Nothing changed. She felt abandoned by God, convinced she wasn't worthy of being chosen for healing. Then Margaret attended one of Joel's classes where he explained this principle. She realized she'd been approaching everything backward. She wasn't unchosen by God. She was choosing limitation by seeking healing from outside herself. That night, instead of praying for healing, she sat in silence for 20 minutes, simply acknowledging divine presence as the only reality. No asking, no pleading, just recognition. Within 3 days, the pain began subsiding. Within 2 weeks, it was completely gone. But here's what matters most. Margaret didn't just receive physical healing. She discovered her spiritual identity. She realized she had always been whole in consciousness, and the pain was simply her belief in separation made manifest. She became one of the chosen by choosing to see through spiritual eyes rather than material perception. Another student, Thomas, was facing bankruptcy in his business. He had 48 hours before losing everything he'd built over 15 years. He came to Joel desperate, wanting a miracle, wanting God to intervene and save his company. Joel told him something that seemed cruel at first. Your problem is not your business. Your problem is that you believe you have a problem. Thomas was angry initially. How could Joel dismiss his very real crisis? But Joel explained, in divine consciousness, there is no lack, no loss, no failure. These exist only in the material sense of life. If Thomas would stop trying to fix the problem and instead recognize the presence of infinite supply as his true consciousness, the solution would appear naturally through that awareness. Thomas spent those 48 hours not working on business plans, but sitting in silence, recognizing supply as a spiritual reality already present. On the final day, a former client he hadn't heard from in years called with an opportunity that not only saved his business but expanded it significantly. Thomas learned that being chosen means choosing to see reality from consciousness rather than from circumstance. This shift took him from panic to peace to prosperity. A third example shows how this principle works in relationships. Sarah had been praying for her husband to change for 12 years. She attended church regularly, did affirmations, visualized their marriage improving. Yet their relationship grew colder each year. She believed God wasn't answering her prayers, that perhaps she wasn't among those chosen to have a happy marriage. When Sarah encountered Joel's teaching, everything shifted. She stopped praying for her husband to change. She stopped seeing him as the problem. Instead, she began practicing the presence of love as a spiritual reality, not dependent on his behavior or her feelings. She would sit quietly several times daily, recognizing that divine love was the only presence in her consciousness, in her home, in her marriage. Something remarkable happened over the next 3 months. As Sarah's consciousness changed, her husband naturally responded differently. Without any words about spirituality or any pressure to change, he became more attentive, more affectionate, more present. The marriage transformed because Sarah stopped seeking change from outside and instead embodied the love she wanted to experience. She chose to be chosen by living from spiritual truth rather than material appearance. These 3 stories reveal the pattern Joel discovered in thousands of cases. Physical healing, financial restoration, relationship transformation, all emerge from the same principle. When you stop seeking God's intervention and start recognizing God's presence as your own consciousness, you move from the many called to the few chosen. Not because God changed, but because you did. The critical shift is from petition to recognition, from seeking to realizing, from trying to become to acknowledging what already is. This doesn't happen through positive thinking or mental tricks. It requires genuine spiritual perception, seeing beyond the material appearance to the divine reality underneath. Joel proved repeatedly that this shift in consciousness produces tangible results in the visible world. Each of these people spent weeks, not days, developing this awareness. Margaret practiced 20 minutes daily for 2 weeks. Thomas spent 48 hours in concentrated recognition. Sarah dedicated 3 months to consistent inner work. The chosen ones are those willing to invest time in consciousness rather than demanding instant external changes. They understand that spiritual realization precedes material demonstration. If these transformation stories inspire you to explore your own spiritual choosing, like this video to help others discover these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your current journey. Beyond the basic practice, Joel taught a complementary technique he called the beholder. This means you step back from your thoughts, feelings, and circumstances and simply observe them without judgment or resistance. You become the witness of your experience rather than being identified with it. From this place of detached awareness, you recognize that the real you is the consciousness beholding, not the conditions being beheld. When anxiety arises, instead of fighting it or being consumed by it, you become the beholder. You observe, there is anxiety appearing in consciousness. You don't claim it as yours. You don't battle it. You simply watch it from the position of pure awareness. This subtle shift removes the power from the emotion because you're no longer feeding it with identification. You're recognizing yourself as the consciousness in which experiences arise and fall. Practice this throughout your day. When frustration appears, behold it. When worry surfaces, behold it. When physical discomfort manifests, behold it. Each time you do, you're strengthening your identity as consciousness itself rather than as the victim of circumstances. This is another dimension of being chosen. You choose to identify with the eternal witness rather than with temporary conditions. Joel also taught what he called the secret of the locked door. This refers to the practice of closing your door, literally and figuratively, to commune with the Father within. In our modern world of constant connectivity and endless distractions, this practice becomes even more critical. The chosen ones are those willing to disconnect from the world regularly to reconnect with source consciousness. This doesn't mean long hours of meditation. Joel recommended multiple short periods of inner communion throughout the day. 5 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes at lunch, 5 minutes in the evening. During these periods, you're not thinking about your problems or making mental lists. You're resting in the awareness of presence, allowing divine consciousness to fill your being without agenda or effort. The locked door represents your willingness to shut out the world's claims, opinions, and demands temporarily. In that sacred space, you're not trying to get anything from God. You're not even trying to be spiritual. You're simply being aware that in this moment, consciousness is all that exists. This regular practice builds a foundation of inner peace that circumstances cannot shake. Another powerful technique Joel shared is releasing the pairs of opposites. Most people live trapped between good and bad, health and sickness, abundance and lack, success and failure. They pray for the good and fight against the bad, but Joel revealed that both sides of every pair exist only in the material sense of life. In spiritual consciousness, there are no opposites, only the infinite presence of God being itself. When you find yourself hoping for good to come or fearing that bad will happen, stop. Recognize that both are mental concepts, not spiritual reality. Health is not the opposite of sickness in consciousness. Health is the recognition that wholeness is the only truth. Abundance is not the opposite of lack. Abundance is the awareness that infinite supply is the nature of divine expression. You're not choosing one over the other. You're seeing beyond both. This practice requires vigilance because the world constantly reinforces duality. Every news report, every conversation, every advertisement tries to convince you that opposites are real and you must choose sides. The chosen ones are those who refuse this trap. They see through the appearance of opposites to the underlying unity of spiritual reality. This vision liberates them from the endless battle between positive and negative. Joel taught one more essential practice: living by grace. This means recognizing that your good does not come through your efforts, your worthiness, your hard work, or your clever strategies. Your good flows naturally from consciousness itself when you stop blocking it with beliefs in limitation. Grace is not something God gives to favorites. Grace is the natural overflow of spiritual awareness, unobstructed by material beliefs. To live by grace, you must release the belief that you must earn, deserve, or work for your spiritual inheritance. This doesn't mean you become passive or lazy in the world. It means you stop believing that your actions create your good. Your actions express your consciousness, but consciousness itself is the source. When you align with this truth, right action flows naturally and effortlessly. Practice this by noticing when you're straining, forcing, or manipulating to make things happen. In those moments, stop and breathe. Recognize that infinite intelligence is already operating, already arranging, already providing. Your job is not to make it happen, but to allow it to happen through your awareness and cooperation. This is how the chosen ones live, resting in grace while remaining actively engaged in life. Now let's address what happens when you practice these principles and nothing seems to change. This is where most people give up and conclude they're not among the chosen. But Joel warned about this crucial period he called the testing time. When you first shift to spiritual consciousness, your old mental patterns don't immediately disappear. They rise up stronger, trying to convince you that this approach doesn't work. During this testing time, appearances may actually seem to worsen. Physical symptoms might intensify, financial pressure might increase, relationships might become more strained. This is not evidence that the principle is false. It's evidence that you're challenging deeply rooted beliefs and they're fighting back. The material sense of life resists spiritual awareness because they cannot coexist in the same consciousness simultaneously. Joel advised students to persist through this period without wavering. Don't judge the truth by temporary appearances. If you've been believing in limitation for 30 years, that belief structure won't dissolve after 3 days of practice. It requires consistent, patient recognition of spiritual truth despite what your eyes show you. The chosen ones are simply those who refuse to quit during the testing time. Another common challenge is what Joel called taking on the world's beliefs. Even as you practice spiritual consciousness, you live in a world that bombards you with messages of fear, lack, sickness, and limitation. Every news broadcast, every casual conversation, every advertisement reinforces material beliefs. If you're not vigilant, you'll unconsciously absorb these beliefs and wonder why your practice isn't working. The solution is developing what Joel called spiritual immunity. Just as your body can become immune to certain diseases, your consciousness can become immune to the world's limiting beliefs. This happens through consistent recognition that only God is power. When you hear about economic crisis, you don't fight it or fear it. You simply recognize that has no power in spiritual consciousness. When someone tells you about their illness, you feel compassion but don't accept disease as reality in God. This doesn't mean you become cold or unfeeling. It means you refuse to give power to appearance. You train yourself to see through material claims to the spiritual truth underneath. This takes practice and can feel awkward at first. But over time, you develop a consciousness that remains undisturbed by the world's chaos, not through denial but through realization. A third challenge many face is impatience with the process. You want healing now, abundance now, peace now. When it doesn't manifest on your timeline, you doubt everything. Joel addressed this by explaining that spiritual demonstration operates on consciousness time, not clock time. A shift in consciousness might manifest instantly or might take months to appear in visible form, depending on how deeply rooted the limiting belief is. He used the example of pregnancy. From conception to birth takes 9 months. You cannot rush it or force it. Spiritual realization works similarly. The moment you truly realize a spiritual truth, conception has occurred. But the gestation period varies. Some demonstrations are born quickly, others need time to develop. Your impatience doesn't help. Your trust and continued recognition do. The chosen ones learn to live in the now, satisfied with the consciousness itself rather than desperate for the demonstration. They know that consciousness is cause and manifestation is effect. When the cause is established, the effect must follow. Their peace comes from knowing they're living in spiritual truth, whether or not the visible world has caught up yet. This patience is actually power, not passivity. The final major obstacle is spiritual pride. Ironically, as you begin experiencing results from these principles, ego can creep in. You start thinking you're more chosen than others, more advanced, more spiritual. This subtle arrogance actually blocks further progress because it reintroduces separation. You've simply created a new form of material identity, a spiritual ego that believes it's special. Joel warned strongly against this trap. The moment you think you're chosen because of your spiritual attainment, you've missed the entire point. No one is more chosen than anyone else. Everyone has equal access to divine consciousness. The only difference is who has recognized it and who hasn't yet. And that recognition isn't a trophy you earned. It's a gift you received by being willing to look within. Stay humble in your practice. When healing occurs, don't credit yourself. When abundance flows, don't think you manifested it through your power. Recognize that consciousness itself is the healer, the supplier, the transformer. You're simply the transparency through which it operates. This humility keeps the channel open. Pride clogs it. The truly chosen are those who know they're nothing in themselves and everything in God. If these challenge-breaking techniques resonate with your spiritual journey, like to support this transformative content, subscribe for advanced consciousness practices, and comment which obstacle you're most ready to overcome right now. Let's explore how this principle operates in advanced daily situations. Consider the workplace where you face difficult colleagues or demanding bosses. Most people pray for God to change the other person or remove them from the situation. But Joel taught that every person in your experience is appearing in your consciousness, which means they're there to reveal something about your own state of awareness. When a difficult coworker appears, instead of resenting them, use this technique. Recognize that divine consciousness is the only presence where that person is. Don't try to change their behavior. Don't mentally argue with them. Simply see through their human appearance to the spiritual reality underlying it. As you consistently hold this awareness, one of two things happens. Either they change naturally, or they exit your experience entirely. A man named Robert practiced this with a boss who made his life miserable for 2 years. Instead of quitting or fighting, Robert spent 3 months seeing his boss as spiritual consciousness rather than as a tyrant. He never spoke about this to anyone or tried to manipulate the situation. Within 4 months, the boss was transferred to another division. Robert learned that being chosen means choosing to see everyone through spiritual eyes, even those who challenge you most. In family relationships, this principle becomes even more profound. Your spouse, your children, your parents often trigger your deepest wounds and strongest reactions. Most people try to fix their family members or wish they were different. But Joel revealed that your family members are your greatest spiritual teachers, showing you exactly where your consciousness still holds limitation. A woman named Diana used this with her teenage son who was rebellious and failing in school. She stopped nagging, stopped threatening, stopped trying to control him. Instead, every time she thought about him or saw him, she practiced recognizing the Christ consciousness as his true identity. She didn't tell him what she was doing. She simply held this awareness consistently, sometimes dozens of times per day. Over 6 months, her son transformed. Not because she manipulated him through spiritual techniques, but because her consciousness changed. As she stopped seeing him as a problem and started recognizing his spiritual wholeness, he naturally responded from that higher level. His grades improved, his attitude shifted, their relationship healed. Diana became chosen by choosing to see her son as God sees him, despite all evidence to the contrary. Financial challenges provide another arena for advanced practice. When bills pile up and money seems scarce, panic is the natural human response. But Joel taught that the chosen ones respond differently. They recognize that supply is spiritual, not material. Money is simply a symbol of the infinite abundance that already exists in consciousness. When you realize this, supply flows through unexpected channels. A businessman named Frank faced this when his income suddenly dropped by 60%. He could have panicked, cut everything, scrambled desperately. Instead, he practiced recognizing infinite supply as his consciousness for 30 minutes each morning and evening. He didn't visualize money or affirm abundance. He simply rested in the awareness that consciousness itself is full, complete, lacking nothing. Within 8 weeks, 3 new income streams appeared from completely unexpected sources. He didn't hustle more or work harder. He aligned his consciousness with spiritual abundance, and form followed. Frank learned that being chosen in the financial realm means refusing to accept material appearance as reality, and instead recognizing supply as an infinite spiritual truth always available to consciousness that realizes it. Health challenges in chronic or serious conditions require this advanced understanding. When doctors give dire diagnoses, or when pain persists despite all efforts, spiritual consciousness becomes your only true resource. Joel healed himself of tuberculosis through this principle decades before he taught others. He realized that disease exists only in the belief that life is material and vulnerable. In spiritual consciousness, wholeness is the only truth. A woman named Catherine was diagnosed with a condition doctors said was incurable and progressive. She was given medications that made her feel worse. After studying Joel's work, she made a radical decision. She would spend 1 year practicing spiritual consciousness before accepting the medical verdict as final. Every morning and evening, she sat recognizing the truth. God is the only life, the only presence, the only power. Disease has no existence in that reality. It took 11 months, but her symptoms gradually disappeared. When she returned to her doctors, they found no trace of the condition. They called it spontaneous remission, a medical mystery. But Catherine knew. Consciousness changed, and form followed. She became chosen not through special divine favor, but through choosing to identify with spiritual wholeness rather than material diagnosis. This is the ultimate demonstration of this principle in action. As we move toward completion, understand that living as one of the chosen becomes your natural state, not something you strain to achieve. After weeks and months of practice, recognizing spiritual consciousness becomes automatic. You stop trying to be spiritual and simply are. This is what Joel called dying daily to the material sense of life and being reborn into spiritual awareness. Your days transform when this becomes established. You wake already aware of divine presence. You move through challenges without losing your center. You encounter difficulties but aren't defined by them. You see through appearances to reality. You live from the inside out, rather than letting outside circumstances determine your inner state. This is true freedom, the liberation that comes from choosing to be chosen. This doesn't mean you become perfect or never have human moments. It means you have a foundation that holds steady beneath the changing surface of life. When you forget and get caught in material thinking, you notice quickly and return to truth. When appearances scream limitation, you remember what's real. You become unmoved by the world's drama because you're anchored in something that doesn't change. The chosen life is marked by several characteristics Joel observed in mature students. First, a deep inner peace that isn't dependent on circumstances. Second, a naturalness about spiritual things, without the need to prove or defend or convince. Third, an ability to be in the world fully engaged, yet not controlled by it. Fourth, a quiet joy that bubbles up from within rather than being triggered by external events. These aren't things you try to develop. They're the natural fruit of consistent spiritual realization. As you practice recognizing divine consciousness as the only power and presence, these qualities emerge organically. You don't work on becoming peaceful. Peace reveals itself as your true nature when anxiety is seen as the illusion it is. You don't cultivate joy. Joy flows naturally when you stop looking to conditions for happiness. Other people begin noticing something different about you, though they might not be able to name what it is. You carry a presence that affects those around you without trying. Your consciousness of truth becomes a silent blessing to everyone you encounter. This is the real meaning of being chosen. You become a transparency through which divine consciousness operates in the world, blessing without effort, healing without intention, transforming simply by being. As you continue this path, you'll discover layers you didn't know existed. Just when you think you understand, a deeper revelation comes. This is natural and beautiful. Spiritual awakening isn't a single event, but an ongoing unfoldment. Each day brings opportunity to see more clearly, realize more deeply, embody more fully. The chosen ones are those who embrace this endless journey with patience and wonder. Joel taught thousands of students over decades, and he observed this pattern repeatedly. Those who persisted through the testing time, who practiced daily despite appearances, who remained humble yet committed, these were the ones who experienced sustained transformation, not because they were special, but because they chose consistently. They chose truth over appearance, consciousness over condition, spiritual reality over material sense. You stand at this same choice point right now. Everything you need is already within you. Divine consciousness is not separate from your awareness in this moment. The kingdom is at hand, not tomorrow. All the peace, all the abundance, all the healing, all the wisdom you seek is present right now in consciousness. The question is not whether you'll be chosen. The question is whether you'll choose to recognize what already is. So here is your invitation, not from me, but from truth itself. Begin today. Not tomorrow. Not when conditions improve. Not when you feel more ready. Today, pause and recognize divine presence as your own consciousness. Do this not once, but many times throughout your day. Let it become as natural as breathing. Watch what happens over weeks and months as this recognition deepens and stabilizes. Remember, you're not trying to become chosen. You're realizing you already are. Every person who has ever walked this earth has the same divine consciousness at their core. The only difference between the many called and the few chosen is the choice to recognize this truth and live from it consistently. That choice is available to you right now, in this moment, as you hear these words. Joel Goldsmith spent his life proving that spiritual consciousness heals, transforms, and liberates. He left these teachings not as theory, but as practical tools anyone can use. The results speak through thousands of transformed lives across decades. Now it's your turn. Choose to be chosen, not through arrogance or spiritual pride, but through humble recognition that God is the only presence where you are. From this realization, everything else flows naturally. If your understanding has expanded through these Joel Goldsmith revelations, like this video to help others discover this truth, subscribe for more transformative spiritual teachings, and comment, "I choose to be chosen," to declare your commitment to this path of consciousness.